What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 20 of the Flex RX. It has been going weekly for the last, I think I was in Italy for 1 week, but about 5 months. So pretty cool stuff. But we're going to be diving in for today for this episode. And the topic of today is going to be look at the scoreboard, or the importance of a scoreboard. So I've read one of my favorite books of all time is probably going to be The One Thing by Gary Keller. Phenomenal book. And so let me write some of this down on the Jamboard. So the idea in The One Thing is that what is the one thing that you can focus on that makes everything else either unnecessary or just far less kind of important by comparison. So the idea of the scoreboard. So the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. So he speaks to like there's something that we can be doing in like all the time we can be spent being busy. There's usually one thing that we can put all our focus into that makes everything else, unnecessary, or it's just by far less important. So it's the piece here is focus and prioritizing. So in fitness, there's some things that matter far more than other things. But sometimes we get lost in the weeds. Like if you're spending all this time on your fitness, but you're focusing on, eating carbs after 6 p.m. and you're getting super frustrated about that, or you're focusing on, white rice or brown rice. But then in the overall, like you could put all this time into those kind of topics or all this mental stress, but you get nowhere. Or you could put it into, the one thing that matters. And often that's going to be calorie balance, thermodynamics. So the one thing, another book this is the current book that I'm reading right now, Essentialism. So the one thing by Gary Keller, Essentialism is by, last name is McEwen, I believe. McEwen. And it's kind of the same thing. Essentialism means like just focus on, I think it's like what's essential. Like cut the fluff, focus on like what is actually going to move you forward, what is actually getting stuff done. So those are big pieces. Greg, thank you so much for the donation. Or the tip, I don't know what they're called on YouTube. Appreciate you a ton. Don't have to do that, but I appreciate it. So the topic I want to talk about today is going to be, the idea of the scoreboard. So just like want to help you guys in terms of prioritizing. So when it comes to let's say you're the CEO of a company and your business is doing $0 revenue per month right now. But you're working 80-hour weeks. What do you do? So in this case, you're so busy, but you're getting no return. You're getting no, as a CEO, you're kind of supposed to drive the company to be profitable. And if that's not happening, but you're so quote unquote busy, you're doing all this stuff, you have a full calendar of things to do, but you're not putting any points on the scoreboard for what that scoreboard is for you, then you could be doing nothing and getting the same outcome. So you can scrap that entire calendar and then go into like what is going to be stuff that moves us forward. And so, in this case, that's going to be, my point here is you may be super busy just doing the wrong things. And so it wouldn't even matter if you just went from what you're doing to doing nothing, because both you're either just being busy and going nowhere, or you could be doing nothing and going nowhere. It's kind of a wash, which, frustrating enough, a lot of people are going to be in that position. So when we talk about this from like, let's bring it to a fitness. So say you're trying to lose weight. You read 10 nutrition books. Let's say 10 nutrition books. Don't eat after 6 p.m. Cook home meals 2 hours a day. But the scoreboard shows nothing. So we're doing all this stuff, spending a lot of time cooking this organic food, thinking that organic is going to be the secret to getting us lean, thinking that, each nutrition book, that we read is going to be it. The insulin hypothesis is going to be, getting us, where we want to go. It's not the calories. But when we're overwhelmed by all this information, we can be putting all this time in, but let's look at the scoreboard. What does the scoreboard say? In this case, if body fat loss, if fat loss is the goal, the scoreboard is going to be, hey, hate it or love it, the scale. And if you just don't look at the scoreboard, but you know how you're putting all this time and effort, you're like, oh, I eat healthy, or I'm doing the things, and my goal is, and I do that to lose fat. And then 9 months later, why 9 months? But like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later, you look at the scale and it's like there's no change. So it's kind of like it could have been a wash. You could have been doing not much, getting nowhere, or you could be doing all this stuff and going nowhere. You're just busy. You're not effective. So what is that one thing here that we can focus on to actually get us moving? So 2 points. Number 1, don't hide from your scoreboard. Know your scoreboard. We just talked about a CEO. That CEO, typically it's profitability and it's going to be revenue. Know that scoreboard. If the scoreboard is not showing success, then something must change, especially if you're putting all this hours and time into it, then the things you are doing must change, because you can only add so much to the time that you have to change those tasks. Cut the low priority stuff that has no outcomes and double down on what actually is important. I'm saying this to you guys as much as I'm saying it to myself, because I have not historically done a great job of just reviewing. Let's say, for me, I run a online coaching business. So we need to get new eyes on, the stuff, put out good information out there, new eyes of our services, our client testimonials, transformations. But if we're not getting new eyes from the content and the value that I'm putting it out there, then I need to see, review, okay, what's actually, what's hitting, what is actually gaining traction and being useful for people. What is on the flip side, people are just not watching, or it's not getting so much traction. So it's important to always be evaluating and looking at the scoreboard, because a lot of times we just stop looking at the scoreboard and then we just get stuck in a certain routine. And I've talked to plenty of people on this. They start thinking the routine of the hours they spend of working out, training, even though they're not losing any weight, which is the goal. They then start believing, oh, well, like this is just what I need to do to maintain what I got. They were here. They added 10 hours a week of training, walking, doing whatever. And then they're still here. But since they added all that time working out, now they think that, oh, if I stop working out or if I work out differently, I may lose ground. And a lot of people fear this. But oftentimes, like if you're just so busy and going nowhere, then oftentimes it's frustrating. Like sometimes you're getting just as far as if you did nothing. But let's go back into some of these examples. So back here, I said, my first point here is to look at the scoreboard, see if you're making momentum. The second thing is to change your process or your focus or the way you spend your time if you're not seeing the scoreboard change in your favor. If you're losing the game, then you got to change your actions, or you keep running that same strategy and, the game's going to keep going in the direction that it's going, typically. I'm not a coach. Well, technically I'm a coach, but not like a sports coach or anything, but I tend to see this. Let's see another example here. Number 3, you're doing a ton of training, but not getting stronger. Something should change in terms of your training. You're putting in all this time in the gym, and let's say you want to build muscle. The outcome or the scoreboard you're going to look at before you can actually see tangible muscle change is going to be, am I moving more weight? Do I have more cross-sectional area in my muscles to move more weight? Which means you got to be hitting PRs. You got to be stronger. Typically, if you have 20 pounds more muscle, you're probably able to move a lot more weight than when you had 20 pounds less of muscle. And so, because what induces that force? It's the cross-sectional area of the muscles. And so you're doing a ton of training, but not getting stronger. So you got to change what you're doing in the gym, because you could just stop training and you'll still not be getting stronger. 4, if you're doing, all this training, cardio, cooking, reading, etc., but looking the same year after year, something's got to change. I went to a gym that was like, oh man, dating myself. I guess this was 6 to 8 years ago. Graduating college 2016, 2017. Yeah, 8 years, I believe, ago. And I was at this gym. It was catered towards, more of an elderly population, but I kind of saw, how the personal trainers were doing their thing. It was more of a conversation rather than the actual like doing the work was getting anyone anywhere. And it struck me, I went there, I think for about a year, but people weren't making progress. They weren't adding weight. They weren't really working too hard. And I bet they were looking the same. There weren't really tangible changes, but they were consistent in showing up. But they were showing up to just have a conversation. So then that person could get a different trainer that's, more results oriented. And it's like, maybe they enjoy it less because, hanging around the leg extension, doing some of these with barely any weight, but just having a nice conversation about how the weekend was, that can be the value of the gym for some people. Totally cool. Do your thing. But if someone wants results, if building muscle, if losing fat is important to somebody, then you have someone who's results oriented. They're going to push you to get stronger, to add some weight, to eat some differently, to do different things if that actually wasn't leading to the result. So when we look at the scoreboard consistently, we know if we're actually going somewhere, and we know when we need to change our coach or when we know to change our plan, etc. So this is why it's very important to not hide from the scoreboard, but look at the reality. And I'll tell you again, like in my perspective, like, social media, engagement, all that stuff, it's a part of having an online business in 2024. If I were a business coach, if I were a fitness coach, if I were, just an influencer in general, you got to look and see, what am I doing? Like, what is the scoreboard telling me? Like, what do I need to do more of? What do I need to do less of? Where do I spend my time? Which circles all the way back to the book, the kind of story of the one thing. There's typically that one thing that's going to be able to propel you further when you just zero in, ignore everything else, and just dial in and do that one thing. So the power of, prioritizing and effectively focusing. And so with that being said, a segue too on that is, this is episode 20 of FlexRx. So from here, I'm actually going to be putting FlexRx on pause, on freeze for the time being. I mean, the goal kind of with the FlexRx, this is where we're all about, learning. It's about fitness, learning, enduring, on our way to excellence. And with that said, I've had a lot of fun with these lives. I do enjoy these. These have been all, I'm looking at them. We have 20 episodes, doing about 45 minutes every time. And I mean, let's be realistic in terms of like the scoreboard. Haven't seen engagement increase massively. I feel for the people that are able to be on these live, there's been a good amount of value. That's my goal. That's what I would hope. But as far as, moving forward, I feel that if I am able to utilize my time more, maybe can use this time, because this is a time-consuming thing, to put in more deep work, push other pieces of my business to improve them, to have that time to really be uninterrupted and growing things and learning. I think that I can have more impact over the long term. So for the time being, may hop on some, YouTube lives, probably going to be able to fill that time with more, content creation for my other platforms. Lives also potentially being on Instagram, and just doing, kind of some other things as well, but could be popping on these as well there. So that is my announcement there. Now let's get into some Q&A.